going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to let Laura do her own introduction. I am Darlene with SeniorLivingGuide.com. I work for the digital side because I'm the National Digital Sales Director, and we have a national reach website. We have print publications in Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. We also have hospital directories in, I think, all 50 states. Over 40 markets. So we have some opportunities there. We have the SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast, which is Senior Caregiver Resource Podcast. And actually, Laura just did a podcast with us for seniors and caregivers just to give them the similar information that we're going to get today, but more specifically for them. And then we also have the webinars and I think calendars and different things. So just check out our website at SeniorLivingGuide.com. That is the gist of my spiel. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura and let her introduce herself and share her information.
Great. Thank you, Darlene. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So welcome, everyone. So my name is Laura Williams, and I've been an occupational therapist for about 25 years, working mainly with seniors in a variety of settings, from home care to long-term care to assisted living. And I joined the Center for Vulnerable Voters as their national training coordinator in March of 2023. And one of the things that I do is I work closely with residential communities and provide educational materials, support, guidance, training. And then we also offer election-related legal counsel at no cost to residential facilities. So I am just going to jump right into the presentation. So if you want to advance. Oh. So who are vulnerable voters? Vulnerable voters are folks that serve in the military and their families, individuals that are homeless, individuals with any type of disability, and then individuals residing in residential communities, which is what I will be focusing on today. Next. So at Center for Vulnerable Voters, we have 5 objectives, and today we're just going to focus on 2 of those objectives, which is enabling vulnerable voter constituencies to protect their vote and exercise their civic right to participate in America's election process, and also to train and educate residential communities and skilled nursing staff on how to protect the voting rights of our most vulnerable residents. And I just want to make a note for the purposes of the presentation, I'm going to be using the terms mail-in ballots and absentee ballots interchangeably. Next slide, please. So we developed a Senior Citizen Bill of Rights guide, and I think it's important to have these rights in the back of our mind as we go through the presentation. So I'm going to go through these. The first one is the right to vote or to not vote, and the choice is yours and yours alone. The right to refuse assistance from unknown persons or persons that you do not want help from. The right to privacy. No one has the right to ask you about your voting preferences. It's strictly confidential. The right to redress. If you feel that your rights have been violated, you have a right to go speak to your local election authorities or your local authorities. And the right to have candidates visit your residential community. Next slide. I think that we are all aware that residents in residential communities tend to be a little bit more susceptible to being taken advantage of. I've seen this with financial abuse. I've had to intervene with durable medical equipment companies trying to sell products to a patient that is maybe unsafe or they simply can't use. And so there's always going to be people with ill intent in all aspects of life, and voting is no different. It's important for us to have basic understanding of 4 key terms in order for us to learn how we can advocate for the people we serve. Next slide. So the first key term is vote suppression. And that is a strategy or technique used to influence the outcome of an election by discouraging and or preventing specific groups of people from voting. So the next slide is vote coercion or theft. And that's the use of intimidation or fear of reprisal to secure a vote for a specific candidate. And in some cases, the perpetrator may simply complete the ballot without the voter's authorization. So, and I want to share a few stories reported to us from family members. A daughter had called to report that her dad's caregiver was telling him who to vote for. And he told his daughter he did not want this reported to his caregiver supervisor for fear of retaliation. We had another family member call in that reported a physical therapist told her loved one that anyone that votes for a certain candidate deserves to have their medication taken away. So we believe when a person is dependent upon another for self-cares or any type of services, and they feel the need to please their caregiver or risk upsetting that caregiver, that this is a form of intimidation. The third one is ballot harvesting, and that is the non-secure method of collecting absentee ballots during an election with the intent of dropping them off at the election office or at polling places. And this is legal in some states. And the last one is ballot trafficking, which is the illegal collection or submission of election ballots. An example of this is the U.S. Postal Service has implemented a new procedure for the change of address process. And that was initiated after an investigation revealed people with ill intent were submitting change of address requests on unsuspecting people. Then the people with ill intent would request a mail-in ballot and then submit that ballot. And these unsuspecting people were unaware until they went to vote on election day, and they were told that they had already had a vote cast for them through the mail. So this is an example of ballot trafficking. So how does a residential community know where to start when developing or updating their voting policy and procedures? The first thing that we recommend doing is identifying any vulnerabilities that you may have. So for example, is there staff training? Is management aware of election dates and deadlines? Is there a lack of management oversight? Is there any unmonitored assistance with ballot requests and or submissions? And is there requests and submitting of ballots of residents with cognitive impairments? Next. Is there unmonitored chain of custody with the absentee or mail-in ballots? So basically, am I aware of where that vote by mail ballot is from the time it enters my facility till the time it leaves my facility? Am I aware of the intent of outside groups? Is any outside groups asking staff to fill out ballots for residents? Are outside groups entering the community to help residents with any part of the voting process? And it's important to note that most election authorities will send election officials out to residential communities to assist residents who have requested the help. The facility just needs to make that request to the election authorities. So once the vulnerabilities are identified and you've explored your state and local regulations regarding residential community voting, you can begin to create policies and procedures for the voting process specific for your community. And then of course you want to be able to monitor those processes. And then we all know policies and procedures are in place to protect residents, staff, and the facility itself. So Center for Vulnerable Voters, we have some recommendations for what we feel are the residential directors' responsibilities. We believe that educating staff on voting laws in your state, as well as penalties for violating those laws, are important. We believe directors should be teaching staff that it's never okay to tell a resident how to vote or who to vote for, that it is illegal. And we believe it's important to create procedures which are monitored to protect the chain of custody of those absentee or mail-in ballots. We believe strongly that it's important to know which residents are non-compos mentis and ensure that you know the state and federal voting policies for these individuals. Staff should not request or mark ballots for residents who cannot express that they wish to vote in an election, or they cannot express who their preferred candidate is. It's important to obviously be aware of and enforce ballot assistance laws. Residents should only receive assistance if they request it. So the resident has to express that they need assistance with the ballot application process or the ballot submission process. We believe the best practice is for election authorities from the local election office to assist residents that have requested assistance or have a family member assist. We believe it's important to protect your staff and residents from outside groups, and knowing what those outside groups' intentions are. We want to protect residents from organizations that want to help residents fill out ballot applications and ballots. It's important to enact protocols to protect the residents from possible vote suppression and fraud. And it's equally important to create training programs to teach staff what constitutes vote suppression and fraud. We believe it's important to instruct staff how to protect absentee ballots from ballot harvesters and traffickers, and then create procedures to protect your residents' ballots. And of course, recognizing staff who exemplify best practices and protecting their residents' voting choices we believe is important. And you can find all these recommendations on our website, and it's a guide titled "Their Vote Matters," and I can always email anybody a copy too. So I get several questions, and I'm going to go over 3 of the most common scenarios or questions that I get. The first one is, what do we do if somebody is non-compos mentis? So residents who cannot respond to their name should simply not be given a ballot. So a resident who cannot either express that they wish to vote in the election or cannot indicate their preferred choice on a ballot should not have a ballot marked for them. The second question I get quite frequently is guardianship and how it affects, how guardianship affects specific to my state, and then also residents that may be incompetent. And levels of guardianship vary, we all know that, and then they vary per state too. So we have levels of guardianship vary, and then along with varying state regulations regarding guardianship. And then incompetence is usually determined by a court of law. So we recommend referring back to the statement that residents who cannot either express they wish to vote in the election or indicate their preferred choice on the ballot should not have a ballot request or a ballot marked for them. Now, I realize communities probably have resident-specific questions and scenarios, and we encourage you to seek the advice of your facility's legal counsel first, and then you can always reach out to me and we can see how we can help with those specific scenarios. Another frequent question I receive is what to do if a family member is voting for their loved one. And I don't mean assisting, actually voting for them. And while this is a difficult situation for directors, and I recognize this, however, if the resident was being taken advantage of in a different way, it would likely be addressed. So we recommend that any concerns of suspected illegal activities involving family members should be referred to your facility's legal counsel, the local board of elections, or the local authorities, and then your resident's ombudsman could definitely be a great person to reach out to talk to the family members. There are we believe that you could put some preventative measures in place if you suspect a family situation may arise. So we developed an assisting loved one flyer, and that was actually at the request of a couple directors. They wanted something to be able to hand out at their community, and this is free, and this can be shared as you see fit. And again, this is something, it's not on our website right now, but this is something that is going to be on the website soon, or I can email that to you. And then, as mentioned earlier, most states offer some form of assistance to residents and residential communities who have, again, requested the assistance with the absentee ballot application process or the ballot submission process. So be sure and reach out to your local election authorities, and you can always contact me if you need any assistance. So voting laws. So it's obviously important to follow all federal and state voting laws, and you can find those state-specific voting laws on our website. You can also find the federal laws on our website, and we all know, obviously, following the voting laws protects the residents, the staff, and the facility. I want make a note, though, that our website will be updated sometime in June or July after the legislation sessions are over, because we anticipate new voting laws. So check us out now, but be sure and come back midsummer and take a look at that and see if anything's changed for your state. So we believe it's important for residential directors to weigh their role carefully. So utilizing election authorities for all aspects of the voting process ensures voting regulations are followed. So for voter registration, are there newly moved residents or newly moved in residents that need to update their addresses? We recommend utilizing election authorities for any resident that requests assistance with requesting an absentee or mail-in ballot. If the resident does request assistance with the ballot application process, be aware that they probably will ask for assistance for the actual ballot process. And we recommend utilizing authorities for this process too. And then also ask your election authorities to help protect your resident's ballot chain of custody and ask them to deliver that marked ballot back to the election office. So there's many benefits to utilizing election authorities. They are trained in election laws. They have to take courses in order to be an election authority or an election judge. They're all named a little bit different, but basically an election authority. Election authorities can answer questions accurately. They ensure the privacy of the vote. And then again, they are familiar with those voter assistance laws. Election authorities from both political parties are present, and that's important for checks and balances. They help ensure the proper chain of custody of the ballots, and they allow the poll watcher citizens to observe the process and ensure election laws are followed, and that's just an extra safeguard. So it's important for residential communities to be in constant contact with their local election authorities and request help for anything that you need. So I'm going to briefly go over the main methods of voting that most residential communities utilize. There are other less utilized methods of voting. So for any unusual circumstances, again, be sure and reach out to your local election authority. So there's in-person early voting at the polling place. There's in-person voting on election day at the polling place. And then there's absentee or mail-in voting. And again, some states will send, or actually most states will send election authorities to the facility if requested. Next slide. So whether in-person early voting or in-person voting on election day, polling places are to be handicapped accessible, and that is a federal law. So that's every state. So for in-person early voting or in-person voting on election day at the polling place, if your resident is 75 years or older or disabled, they can move to the front of the line. Some states offer curbside voting, which you can arrange. You want to arrange that ahead of time with your election authority, where they just drive up just like curbside. The polling places should have wheelchair accessible booths. They should have basic assisted devices such as large ballot viewers, audio ballots. And again, the election authorities are there and can provide assistance to your resident if the resident requests it. And then as a perk, early voting usually offers less wait time. So absentee or mail-in ballot method of voting involves the mail-in ballot being requested, being mailed to the facility, the residents marking the ballot, and then returning that ballot via mail or hand delivered to the election offices. So when there's a lack of election authorities involved in the voting process, the residential directors must be aware of and enforce all election laws. It increases the risk of residents receiving incorrect information. There's a lack of chain of custody of the ballots. And then again, the lack of election authorities just makes it a little bit more riskier for the facilities. Next slide. So we believe at Center for Vulnerable Voters in some best practices. So some of the best practices we recommend is utilizing election authorities for your residents for every step of the process. So set up election authorities to visit your residents for voter registration. And that doesn't have to be around election time. That can be at any time. Requesting an absentee ballot if they need ballot assistance. And then again, ask the election authorities to secure and deliver that marked ballot to the election office. We recommend transporting mobile residents to the polls where those trained election authorities are present with those safeguards for the residents. We've had some success with churches and VA organizations stepping up to help provide transportation to residential communities. And you can locate your local election authority on our website. So we believe best practice is to create and implement policies and procedures to protect residents' ballots, and staff. And then, of course, monitor those policies and procedures. And then again, keep in contact with your local board of elections. Even if you have one resident that needs an accommodation, reach out to your local election authority. So there's a few policies that other communities have implemented that I wanted to share. There's one community that documents the name, address, phone, and email of all individuals that come into the community for any voting related events or activities. Another community charts all interactions related to the voting process. And all those interactions includes 2 people, with one of them being a director. And that's even if they have a simple back and forth discussion. They always make sure that there's 2 people involved and they chart that. Another community informs family members of all aspects of the voting process, whether they're going to transport them to the polling place, whether election authorities will be at the community. There was a situation at one community, a residential director shared with me, that they could have resolved if they would have implemented this earlier. But what they had done is they had a resident that wanted to vote by mail. So the vote by mail request was made, and then the family made that request for their loved one. And the election authorities informed the family, and it all got worked out. But the family was a little worked up there for a short time period. Another facility or another community takes all their mobile residents to early voting at the polling center. There is a local community in my neighborhood that the residents that have vote by mail ballots, they filled out their vote by mail ballot, they're ready to deliver it to the election authority. They load up all their residents on the van, and the residents get out of the van and drop the ballot themselves into the drop box, which is right outside the election authority's office. And the residents that are unable to get out of the van driver does that right in the presence of the resident. So the resident can see that their ballot is being dropped into the drop box.
Laura, is there drop boxes at every polling place?
No, it varies per state. Okay. So that again, you'd want to check with your local election authorities. And some, like you can have drop boxes in my state. Some local election authorities have them and some don't. So it really varies.
So if you've completed an absentee ballot, are you allowed to take it in and drop it off to, the front desk for people that are signing in and let them put it in a box of some sort? Or if they don't offer it, you need to find a different way?
It varies per state. Okay. So that's where you got to check out your state guidelines, and you can email me and I can help figure out what your state rules and regulations are. It really does vary per state. Perfect. So,
okay. Sorry, just had to get that in there.
Oh, no, that's great. And another community, all their vote by mail ballots are locked and stored in the director's office till the election authority arrives to assist the residents that have requested assistance, or until the resident is ready to complete their ballot independently. So those are just a few examples of what some other residential communities have already implemented. Okay, next slide. And again, you can download all our information. All our information is free. Our guides, our educational materials are free on the website. Again, I can email you those if you're interested. There's state-specific resources on our website. You can also locate your local board of elections on our website. And you can always email me with questions and concerns, and I will try and help the best I can. And helped out with things, resolving situations where, for an example, a couple days ago, I received a call from a residential community saying, hey, the election authority is telling me they don't send people out to residential communities. Well, the local election authority was unaware that that is a state law, that they have to do that. So we intervene politely with things like that and try to resolve situations. Any unique situations we can help out with. For example, a resident was living in a residential community in one county, but he owned property and a house in another county, and there was some confusion with that. So we just connected with the election authorities and got that straightened out for that resident. And then again, I know I sound like a broken record, but keep in contact with your local Board of Elections, because they are really the go-to person. They are the ones that should be accommodating your residents and meeting their needs in order to allow them to exercise their rights to vote in private and etc. Election laws are always changing. So be sure and try and stay on top of that through your local Board of Elections or your state Board of Elections website. And again, note that we will be updating any new rules or regulations after this state and all the states' legislative sessions end, I believe, in June. And we encourage you to reach out to your facility's legal counsel with any resident-specific situations. So,
and one thing that I know that we've talked about is that if you do move, you need to cancel your voter registration in your previous area, because it doesn't cancel out just because you get a new driver's license.
Yes, that's important to remind your residents that, especially if they're moving from state to state or even county to county, they should be canceling their previous voter registration. I know you and I talked, Darlene, how it should automatically happen with technology today, but unfortunately it's hasn't caught up yet. So put it that way.
Which is insane, but we can do all these things, but that we can't talk to each other from state to state on who's registered to vote. Well, such is life.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So, one of the things that I get from you is contact your Board of Elections.
Yes. Yes. Reach out to them. But again, if you have a concern or there's a conflict of maybe I've provided you some information or you've read something on our website that doesn't match up with what the Board of Elections, your local Board of Elections is saying, reach out to us, because we, we'll investigate it and try and figure out what's going on and try and rectify the situation if we can.
Yeah. Well, I have a few, if you're ready for a little Q&A.
Yes. Yes.
So Simone said, and so this might be more of a comment. Oh, no, there's a question. I have had a few of my residents at my community in registering to vote because they moved to our facility from another county. Do we need to inform their families of this change?
I think it's always good just to keep families informed of anything related to the voting process. I think that it just eliminates a possible situation like mentioned before about the residential director that reported he wished he would have informed family of everything that's going on, and that would have eliminated that situation where they had requested a vote by mail ballot and then the family did. So I would keep family informed of what's going on the best you can.
Yeah, exactly. So quite a few comments about requesting the flyer. So that's something that they can get on your website, or is that, how do they?
The family assisted flyer, I can, however we want to do this, I can share it with, share it with you and you can share it, or they can email me and I can share it. It's not on the website yet, but if they want to shoot me an email, I could just email them that along with the their Vote Matters guide. I could just send them both guides.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do to everyone that's still on is I'm going to send a link out to this webinar, and with that will be my contact information and Laura's contact information. And if you want either one of those things, the flyer or the copy of the, what is it, the rights?
It's called Their Vote Matters, but it's a residential specific training guide on how to identify your vulnerabilities, some recommendations that we have.
Okay. So they can just connect with you directly if they need either one of those. So
either one of those, they can just connect with me directly and I can email them. One's on the website, one isn't. So if you just want to connect with me, I'll just email them both to you.
Okay. And yes, I'll be providing the PowerPoint as well, so that because you said that was good to go, right, Laura?
Yes.
The PowerPoint. Yeah. Okay.
I can email you my, I have a few little updates. I can email you that one and you can share
Okay.
that one instead. Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question. Referring back to the competency of the individual, do they have to be able to independently state the desire to vote without prompting, or just the ability to answer yes or no when asked if they want to vote?
I mean, I think it's okay to ask a resident, do you want to vote in the election?
I think
And
he's asking about the competency, like those that have cognitive issues.
mhm. So I've noticed each facility does it a little bit different. So what my assisted living activity director is going to do, she's going to simply make an announcement at lunch a couple times to make sure she hits everybody, and say anybody that's interested in voting in the upcoming election, please come see me so we can arrange transportation and make sure that you're able to vote how you want to. So that's how one community does that. My community does that. Another community goes around and does ask residents if they would like to vote. So let's say, for example, you go up to Barb and you ask Barb, do you want to vote in the election? And she says yes. She needs to be able to participate in that ballot application process and be aware of what she's doing. It's tricky. I'm not gonna lie, it's tricky.
Right.
But let's say she says yes, she's able to participate, she gets the ballot, and then she requests. The thing is, she needs to request assistance to fill out the ballot application. She needs to request assistance to participate, to have assistance with the ballot process. So as she actually has the ballot in front of her. So let's say she's got the ballot in front of her and she said, hey, I need help. I can't read this. So you read it off to her and she says, do you want to vote for Darlene or Laura? And she's unable to answer. You simply move on to the next candidate, the next question. You can always submit a blank ballot. So if somebody is unable to participate, just submit a blank ballot. It's in my state, it's very important that you write on there unable to participate across the ballot. And I would encourage you, to do that too, to make sure you're writing on that ballot unable to participate, or some reason why that ballot's going back blank.
Yeah, I know it's hard because even with my dad, when he had dementia, he wasn't even sure who the president was at the time. So to try to pick a president, not knowing who the current one was a clear red flag. So I saw this question on here as well. Just to clarify, voting with guardianship is allowed, but use best judgment and check with legal counsel.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So not just because you have a guardian does not mean you can't vote. So each state's a little bit, specific, or has different rules and regulations on guardianship, and most of them, it's by a court of law. You're adjudicated by a court of law.
Yeah. So
That's why we recommend just going back to, is that person able to express a desire to vote in the election, and are they able to freely make a preferred choice for a candidate?
right. So I did see something. Let's see here. The BIMC score. I'd like to know the BIM's MS.
The BIM score.
Okay, yeah. Sorry.
There isn't one that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So I've got that question quite a bit, and I've actually had our legal counsel is looking into that. I don't know that that's a determinant factor that you can use, because the only person that can take somebody's right to vote away is a court of law. So, but again, going back to do they have a desire to vote? Do they have an intent to vote? Are they able to make a free choice? That's what we encourage people to go back to, is intent. Have they expressed a desire to vote? I want to vote in this election. And are they able to freely choose a preferred candidate without any outside influence on a ballot?
So Kelly, I don't even want to try to pronounce her last name, but she, and I'm assuming this is a girl. She put on their activity calendar when the election officials were coming to assist, and they did it as a party.
Oh yeah.
So that's such a great idea.
Yeah.
And she said they had more than 2/3 of their people voted. And she even got a certification to be an election official. So
Oh, good.
how fun,
Yeah.
how fun is that?
Well, and I know many states are short election officials, so that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a comment, competency can be a state directed issue as well. New Jersey states that all they have to do is be able to acknowledge they want to vote. They may not know the candidates, but say I want to vote for one party or another, then they can vote. I'm a little confused by that.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with New Jersey.
Right. Right.
Yeah, New Jersey, but yeah.
But like
Yeah,
you
as long as
mentioned,
if
every
they're making
state's
a
different.
free, yeah, every state's different. And again, as long as they're making a free choice on a ballot, being able to pick a preferred candidate or a preferred party, because a lot of people, just vote straight party, that's fine. The key is, can they make that choice freely on their own? Yeah.
Well, I want to see if we have any more questions before we wrap it up, because I think I've answered them all. If I didn't, please shoot it back in again into the chat box. I think I see all of them. There's a lot of stuff in here though, so. Okay. So Andrea says, if a resident has not been deemed legally incompetent, is it their right as a citizen of this country to vote for the candidate of their choice regardless? If they know who is running, they can vote along party lines without CMS guidance. Is that they are afforded all rights guaranteed? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's been disputed.
Yeah. So if unless a court has adjudicated them from the right to vote, they have a right to vote.
Exactly.
And they have a right to not vote.
Right.
Simply because, someone hasn't lost the right to vote doesn't mean that they, have to vote. They may not want to vote, and they may not have that intent to vote. They may not be able to make a free choice. And if they cannot make a free choice, nobody should be doing that for them.
Right. So there is another question that I think is really interesting, because it's addressing a resident that might be blind. How do you accommodate that? And I mean, that can be just not completely even blind, but as you get older, your eyesight is just super impaired.
So there's a couple different ways. If the resident's mobile and would like to go to a polling place, there's audio ballots. Again, I would reach out to the election authorities, and if the resident's not mobile, then maybe reach out to the election authorities and say, hey, I have a resident that would like to vote in the election. He's visually impaired, he's non-mobile. I really would prefer for the election authorities to come out and help with this. And again, that's a safeguard for the residents, it's a safeguard for the staff, and it's a safeguard for the facility. The more you can get your election authorities involved in all aspects of the voting process, the better all around it's going to be for everyone.
And I did notice on one of your slides that Braille ballots were available. Is that correct?
Yes. So that is, again, you're going to want to reach out to your local election authorities, because they all do it a little bit different. And I can't, speak of one specifically, but there's like electronic ballots, but the resident has to have the assistive device in their possession in order to receive that electronic ballot, the adaption that they need. So there's certain, and each, like I said, each election authority is a little bit different. So that's why any unusual, I mean, I don't hate to label it unusual, but anything out of the ordinary, be sure and just reach out to your election authority.
Right. I'm sorry. I love that we've had this webinar because there's so many things that maybe I didn't think about. And maybe our administrators and those working with our senior living communities didn't think about either. So if it wasn't top of mind, it might be now, so that you're really buttoned up for the election season that we have ahead. So,
yes.
All right. Well, I think that is it. I don't see any more questions. And if you do have more questions, please feel free to reach back out to Laura directly.
Yes.
And once again, I'll be sending that email with your information. So if you didn't grab it, I will be sending that over to you. And it's also got my contact information. And if you have any questions for me as well. So thank you everyone for joining us on our webinar today.
Thank you, everyone.
And Laura, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a wealth of knowledge. And I'm really excited that we were able to work together.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everybody on the call for your service to our vulnerable community.
Absolutely. That's a tough job all the way around. So yes, thank you for everything that you all do. All right. Thank you. Have an amazing afternoon, everyone.
Bye-bye.